So, hi everybody. We're really excited to be here today. And first of all, we would like to thank Natalie and the whole team behind Frog for the amazing conference and organization. I'm Flavia Mazzanti and this is Manuel Bonell, and we are two of the three founders of Emiria. We are a media company based here in Vienna, and we focus on the development of VR games and interactive installations. Manuel and I, we both graduated from the Academy of Fine Arts here in Vienna. So actually we come from a strong background in art and also architecture. And that's why also at Emira we aim to craft unique VR experiences and games that bring new perspectives and interactions to the players and to the people who might experience these projects.
Yeah, at the Mirror, we experiment a lot with philosophical concepts and spatial theories. And we love to experiment with different media, especially with the medium video game and virtual reality in particular. And what is special in our practice is that we work in a varieties of media and projects. So, for example, we range from short films to interactive installations. Our main focus lies on virtual reality and mixed reality. And we also work on VR games and gamification solutions. And in all our projects, we like to challenge the perception, the interaction inside the medium, and how we can explore and expand these different medias.
So the title of our talk today is Surreal Words and Digital Dystopias, Art and Games in Time of Chaos. And we are here interested in discussing and looking at how past art movements, in particular focusing on surrealism, have emerged as a way to convey specific emotions driven by the complexity of their times. So we are here not only interested in looking at artworks and games which are a direct representation of apocalyptic scenarios, but we're mostly interested in looking how the whole emotional landscape which emerged during these difficult times, together with a necessity also of dreaming for fantastic landscape and fictional scenarios, have brought to these artworks, and at the same time also to make some parallels with contemporary video games. So we will look at especially at three focus points all around the topic of our human body, but also the environments or the world where we move and live with, and also make some parallels with contemporary video games. So in general, we always think that art in general always starts as a response to societal changes. So every time or every period of our history is a response to a specific situation, and in art emerge through different art movements. This is a very simplistic diagram actually, because we wanted here more just to focus on the surrealism and also look a little bit of the European figurativism. What we want here actually to look at is more the whole situation, not just a time of crisis, but a whole scenario of societal changes, which was at the beginning of the 20th century. So there was a lot happening, like the advance of psychoanalysis, also the rise of cinema, also the metaphysical reflections, and all these new discoveries and new exciting times were actually coming together with the First World War and the whole period of the interwar and then the Second World War. So this is something which then influenced a lot, especially movements like surrealism, especially also with the discovery of the psychoanalysis and Freud, and this belief that the purpose of creativity was really to explore the unconsciousness and also to question what does it mean reality and how can we also see something real beyond just the surface.
Surrealist art can be seen as a response to the absurdity and chaos of that time. We are talking about post-World War I, during Second World War, and it's creating a space where artists explore the unconscious mind. Through fragmented and dreamlike imagery, surrealism gives visual form to subconscious fears and desires, often to disrupt conventional reality and reflect deeper psychological tensions, especially in these times of crisis. Here are some really influential examples, and also to notice the way they depict the imaginary. It's really dreamlike, sometimes uncanny, fragmented, and distorted.
So today, actually, we're looking mostly at three artists, which are Francis Bacon, Zdzisław Beksiński, and Leonora Carrington. And we are also here not just looking at the whole process of the artists themselves, but just taking some specific artworks and looking at the emotion which wanted to be conveyed through their artworks, and also how these similar emotions are transmitted through games, or also in the last years, in a kind of a parallel also of living in similar times where a lot is happening, a lot of exciting discoveries. At the same time, we are living also in times of chaos. Also to be mentioned that Francis Bacon is not just a direct surrealist painter. He actually is not part of the surrealist movement, but he also, in an interview in 1962, he also admits kind of a certain relation to his paintings together with surrealism, and also how the sense of realism has changed since the discovery with Freud and surrealism, and we are more conscious of how realism can draw on the unconscious. So this kind of historical context is for us really crucial to provide a framework to understand today's medium of video games and also their similar emotional landscape. So for us, not only for us, but video games, much like art, they can also have this unique capacity to evoke a deeper emotional response. And what makes video games really a unique medium, it's really the form of interactive nature, this power to navigate, influence, and experience firsthand a world, and also to be active in their choices, which makes also open up the new opportunities to explore our emotions and how we deal with our fears in these times. So starting from the first point that we want to focus today, which is mostly looking at the topic of bodies, but not just of the human body, but really of the meat, of the flesh, of this rawness. And this is something which we look through the eyes of Francis Bacon paintings. Francis Bacon had a really fascination for the rawness of the body. He liked a lot to depict these images of meat and flesh. And for him, he really said that he was moved by this picture of slaughterhouses and meat. And he was really fascinated how something which might be so beautiful, but also have so much horrific inside, and at the same time this contrast between something which is brutal and also showing the fragility of our life. And in all these paintings there is always something which is very unsettling and also really raw and visceral.
Yeah, if we take our view to video games through the lens of Francis Bacon's work, or what he tries to convey with his artworks, and we think about this concept about meat, flesh, and rawness, we have to step aside to just think straight to horror games in the sense of, okay, this is just another jump scare or gore representation of a being. It's more about understanding this silent suffering, about these formative figures, about trying to understand what rawness could convey inside an aesthetic in a video game. We have here one example where we looked into, and it still wakes a deeper first-person psychological horror game from 2024, from the developers called The Chinese Room. And it's a recent game, and what fascinated us here, where we try to look at it with this new lens of perspective, is that the monster itself, it is present, but it's not the most frightening thing. It's more the moment when you walk through these hallways and you see these meat-like formations. And it's also to see that they are not attacking you directly, but they convey a certain silent suffering. So there's a really formative way of conveying this notion of feeling what is also present by looking at these formative paintings of Francis Bacon. The next game is Corn, a first-person horror adventure game from 2023 by App Software. And to say here on this game, this is heavily inspired by Beksiński and the works of H.R. Giger's, which openly the developers say that this is the main source of inspiration. They not only conveyed the aesthetic, but also the mood of the paintings and everything surrounding this aesthetic. But if we look at it from the perspective of meat, flesh, and rawness, and also on certain elements what Bacon was inspired by, we see some kind of similarities which are really interesting to explore. For example, the concept of the butchery, of the concept of that one life lives from the other, that industrial production of life forms in order to be consumed is also really present inside this game. And also it conveys the sense of flesh and meat, but in combination with mechanical elements, with technological elements, which makes it pretty unique.
Yeah, so actually, also going back to this topic of the meat, of the flesh, we have two more games we would like to bring briefly in, which are actually games which don't just deal with this topic of the meat, of the rawness, but it's really also letting you play as this mess of meat. And one of them is Inside, a narrative-driven platform game. And here there is a moment in the game where you encounter the huddle, and this is a mess of combined human flesh and organs. So actually in this moment, the protagonist becomes really a part of it. And this gives the player the possibility to control it. And by controlling it, this really also affects the way you move through the space and through game. So you kind of squish and squash when you move. And you also are able to perform some simple tasks. So as, for example, just lift some objects and also slam into the walls. And something which is also really interesting is that this huddle seems to also have emotions and feelings. So when it's going against a wall, it is able to feel pain and really to suffer from it, which is also an interesting experience. And another game, it's a Carrion, a reverse horror game where actually the player controls this kind of monster, but it's not really just a monster. It's really more an amorphous creature. So it's again this possibility of controlling something or playing as something which is just has this rawness of just this flesh, and it's affecting the way you also move through space, which is also really interesting for us.
Looking further, if we have this topic of rawness and meat, of flesh in that sense, it's really obvious to look immediately about flesh in the translated sense, biological tissue. But what if we analyze rawness in terms of aesthetic? What if we think about how can a video game be raw? What does it would mean to make a raw style of video game? And by further looking into it, it's also to understand what does raw really mean. Raw doesn't mean not being complete. Raw is complete in itself. It is rather unfiltered. It is rather that imperfection and mistakes can exist inside this aesthetic. And really interestingly is to look at recent horror games which borrow aesthetic from early PlayStation 1 graphics with really jiggery polygons, with unfinished textures or really low resolution textures. And when we look at these examples here, we have mouthwashing and How Fish is Made from the same developer of Wrong Organ. And both games convey a really sense of unease once you start playing them. It's kind of the lack of the details and the lack of you are trying to understand, you are trying to really unveil what you see, trying to be aware of your surrounding. But by navigating through these scenarios and through these levels, you become really uneased and faced with something that you cannot understand completely. And it creates more tension than having a really fleshed out game with gore and horror elements. Especially in mouthwashing, when you play it and you have these dialogues which are just text on the screen and the facial expressions are completely neutral. But because they're neutral, they create this really unsettling feeling that you cannot read the facial expression, which makes it even more unsettling. It makes it more unpredictable.
So the second point we want to bring today are more looking into the world and the landscapes, and especially looking through the works of Beksiński, which like often you have this really huge landscapes which looks almost desolate, and even if there is somebody inside, it feels like something which is somebody who is there and doesn't belong to this place. So there are these huge monumental statues and structures which really gives you this feeling of being small, very small and insignificant. And so we are really looking at this power of scale, and also of this, which provokes this sense of megalophobia, but also this feeling of timelessness. You don't know how long these structures have been there. It feels like they have always been there, and they will be there forever. So it's really giving like this kind of a hopeless feeling of not belonging, and also not being there in the right moment and not in the right place.
In the VR game Utility Room from 2023, a game developed by one person, Lionel Marsden, is a VR game where you are confronted with this feeling of megalophobia. He even plays in this game between different feelings of being closed in, claustrophobic moments, and these big, open, vast landscapes. It creates this feeling of not belonging there, this feeling of timelessness, meaning you don't understand how long has it been there already, how long will it be there. You're just brought in a single moment, and you feel already you don't belong there because of the different scales and the monolithic structures it conveys.
This is also something which can be found in other games, like for example, Shadow of the Colossus, where it's also the beginning, this feeling that you enter this space which has been there forever, and there are these huge spaces which are also like really empty, but they are supposed to be empty, so it's really intentional. And also this feeling that you shouldn't be there, because actually you shouldn't, because this is a forbidden land, and you are just there, and it's not your place to be.
Yeah, especially when you look at Beksiński's paintings and these vast landscapes confronted with these unsettling environments, it creates this moment of desolation and death. You don't feel anything alive. Also, the sound of the silence in the games is really important. So having these kind of landscapes together with silence or almost silence really brings this aspect of the feeling even further, of this timelessness.
And then the last point we would like to touch today is kind of a combination of bodies and the world where we are, which is through this eerie and uncanniness shown through hybrid creatures. This is really central in the work of Leonora Carrington, and this is also really present through her experiences through the Second World War, and also the impact this had on her mental health. And this is really giving this vulnerability and this sense of awareness of your own mortality. And something that she says that going through the war brought her to this feeling of being, or realization of being both mortal and touchable, and that I could be destroyed, which is really so powerful. This is something which we can always find in her painting, which are so surreal. And we find kind of these eerie creatures, but at the same time, there is always something really creepy going on behind, which is like some deaf bodies or cannibalism, or like some ritualistic elements. So it's always bringing kind of something really unfamiliar. So the familiar becomes strange and filled also with these hidden meanings.
A game,
Yeah, and this is also something which can be found in interesting also in two titles which are still not just announced and not released yet, with our Anonymous and the Reanimal, and they are still in development, so there is not so much. But it's also we still have to wait to see like really the experience itself. But something which we found really interesting is, on the one hand, this kind of feeling through these times, also to this need to have again these really eerie creatures and hybrid figures, and at the second hand also with Hieronymus, which is aesthetically inspired by Hieronymus Bosch, but it's the point where the developers themselves write that through this experience, they want actually to bring through this creature like the disturbing elements of psychological disorders as well, which sounds really interesting in a sense of not just going through the aesthetic, but also something really in depth into the content.
This last example, pretty brief in relation to Carrington, is the Animal Well, a Metrovania-like game from 2024 developed by solo developer Billy Basso. And what we experience in this game is a similar moment of encounters with these animals. It feels like, doesn't feel like, I mean, they live there. They are not your friends, and they are not even, in the direct sense, a threat. They don't hunt you down, but in the same time, they're dangerous. They are unpredictable. And you are interfering in the world. You are just there, but they were here before you. So they own this land in that sense. And you, by being there, you confront them. They look at you like the creatures in the paintings of Carrington. And you have this kind of feeling, can I trust them? Can I not trust them? What are their reactions? What are they doing? And creating this kind of atmosphere of unease and all this layer of detail, which we really loved inside this game.
So actually, just to conclude, today we were aiming to bring a reflection on contemporary video games through the lenses of Pars art movement born during times of chaos. And we were mostly interested, as we said before, not just a look through like direct representation of these times of apocalypse and chaotic feelings, but really like what can actually come when all these feelings and these emotions are so present in ourselves. And at the same time, we also want to bring some more fantastic and surreal words. So today we have video games as a medium, and we hope to have much more to bring much more dimensions into these feelings in these times of chaos. And thank you very much.